Today we've got an automotive project where we're going to change the rear brakes on a 2008 Chevy Impala, and we're going to change both the pads and the rotors. And the wrench sizes that you're going to need for this are a 14 millimeter, we've got a socket here, and a 13 millimeter. The lug nuts are going to be a 3/4 inch, and I also like to have a torque wrench so I can torque those down when we're done. And you're also going to want a T30 Torx. And let's go ahead and we'll get started on this project. Before I get started, I'm just gonna crack the lug nuts loose with a 4-way wrench. And I'm gonna do that before I jack the car up, because otherwise the tire's just gonna spin. And now I can jack the car up the rest of the way. I'm going to set a jack stand under there just to be extra safe, and then I can spin the tire off the rest of the way here. If you want a nice seat, you can just set your tire down and sit on it. Now take your caliper pins out first, which are right here. And this is going to be a 14 millimeter. So just make sure your wrench is going in the right direction, which is the counterclockwise, of course. And I'm going to try to do this, but I think I'm going to need a little help from a little handheld sledge just to break it loose here. If you're going to hit this with the sledge, just make sure that it's definitely on there good, on the nut head. And we'll get the bottom one. It's going to be the same thing. With your caliper pins off, just kind of slide your caliper off and set it somewhere, but don't dangle it on the hose. So I just kind of set it on the control arm here. And now I can wiggle the brake pads out. Which these pads are totally shot. And now I'm just going to use my 13 millimeter to take off the caliper bracket, and you can be sure it's going to be pretty darn tight on this car because I don't think these brakes have ever been changed. And then pop your caliper bracket off. I'm going to put just a dab of penetrating oil around the hub here. And this is the old rotor, so I'm not as worried about getting it on the rotor here. And then actually, there's a little Torx screw right here. And just in case that's stuck, I'm just going to let that penetrating oil soak for just a minute on there. And then we're going to use a T30 Torx to take this little rotor screw off. Just be really careful not to strip it, or you'll have to drill it out. And then look at this, thank goodness, the rotor's coming right off. And before we put our new rotor on, I'm just going to take some anti-seize and just put a little bit around the hub here. Just be careful not to get any of this on the new brakes. This will just make sure it doesn't stick on you in the future. And I've already cleaned this off with brake cleaner. we're going to put it on. We're going to align it with the little screw that holds it on, which isn't really holding it on. It's really the tire that's holding it on, but this kind of just keeps it in place. Put a little anti-seize on our T30 Torx retainer screw. We're going to snug that up. Not going to get too crazy. I'm going to wire brush up my old clips because the new brakes didn't come with clips. And just be careful not to get any junk down inside these little boots. So we're going to point those downwards. Just kind of clean these up just a little bit before we put it on. And then we can go ahead and stick our caliper bracket back on. And I'm going to go ahead and put a little anti-seize on these big bolts because these ones are bare to get off if they're sticky. Just snug up the bracket good. Before I put my new pads on, I'm just going to lubricate any place that slides. Put a little bit on the back because that might help with the chatter. And just in these little grooves here. We'll just repeat on the back one. Try to keep it off the pad. And then this isn't really sliding, but again, anything metal's touching will just hopefully help any squealing or squeaking. Now we're just going to push the piston back in with my wood clamp here. I'm just going to push really slowly, make sure nothing binds up on the way in. And I've got the reservoir cap off under the hood, which will just kind of help relieve the pressure as this is pushing back in. Make sure your seal stays in place here good. All right, and it's put back all the way. And then we'll just set it in place. Push your little rubber boots back in place. I'm going to lubricate up the caliper pins. Don't want to put too much on here, but just enough to make sure it slides really good. And just a tiny bit of anti-seize on the threads. And when you push this in, make sure it aligns with the boot, doesn't squish the boot or anything. Should go in pretty smooth. snug them up good. Now we just have to stick the tire back on and torque it. Make sure to torque in a star pattern and just gradually work your way up to 100 foot-pounds, which is what these lug nuts should take. You have to set the tire down a little bit to get enough to stop it from spinning. And you might want to just re-torque them after about, I don't know, first couple drives. Just make sure they're staying tight. And that's it. Now all you have to do is pump up the brakes until the pedal feels firm again, and you're all set. If you like these kinds of automotive videos, or just projects in general, make sure to click the little subscribe button and click the bell to be notified for future videos. Thanks for watching.